Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Leslie with the New Mexico Small Business Development Center, and I'm always happy to be here with Eric Spellman because I tell you, we're lucky to have him. He gives this whole series of webinars on valuable information for small business owners, and today is not any different. Today is, should I have a phone app for my business? Because, you see those phone apps, and so I think this may give you some insight if you should have one for your business. The New Mexico Small Business Development Center reminds all New Mexico small businesses to be aware of the risks to their cybersecurity. With that, we have a whole series of on-demand pre-recorded cybersecurity webinars on our YouTube channel, and I'm going to chat over the link to everyone. But today, with Eric's presentation, type your questions in the Q&A because he is so good at picking them up and he likes those questions. And I was told, except if it comes from me, there's no dumb questions. So Eric, turning it over to you.
Thank you, Leslie. Wow, this is going to be a good topic. I get asked about this, oh my gosh, all the time. Chances are, as a small business owner, you've probably been called by someone saying, hey, all your competitors are getting phone apps. How about you? You don't want to be left behind. And while that can be a great sales tactic, it's not always the best decision for a small business owner. So I'm going to give you the information you need before you make that decision, because trust me, it can be very costly. And I'll tell you exactly how much coming up. So stay tuned. Here's the deal. And this is kind of where we're going to be going through this whole presentation. Think before you click. Okay. And by that, I mean, you're going to land on some website promising you the moon as it comes to building you a phone app, an application for a mobile device or tablet or phone, whatever. And so before you click and go, oh yeah, let's start a free trial. No, think. So here are the things. We're going to talk about what actually is an app, because you'll be surprised. Some of you, I'm not trying to be mean here. Some of you don't even know what one is, okay? Or if you do, it's way too wide. It's way too vague. And you need to specifically understand what is an app and what is not an app. What is a mobile site, which is different than an app? How to justify an app. Yeah, we're going to talk about, you're going to have to weigh the pluses and minuses. And yes, there are minuses to having an app built. And then I'm going to tell you how to get one done. And part of that, just so you know, I've been through an entire app development process, and I'll tell you my story, including costs, so that you understand what you're about to be in for. We'll talk about the suitable uses. In other words, what actually justifies an app? What use do you have? What process do you have that would benefit by having an app? And then finally, the most important question of all, how much should it cost? So let's dive right into it and start with what is an app. Now, most of you probably think, well, it's what's on my phone. You'll pull up your phone and you'll see a whole bunch of little icons and you think every single one of them is an app. Well, most of them are, but not all of them. You got to realize that when we talk about an app, it can't just be a copy of your website on a phone. For those of you who don't really understand how apps work, you have to write a program and then you have to submit that program to either Apple or Google, and they have to approve you. In other words, you don't just get to throw an app out there. You don't just get to use the App Store in the Apple App Store or the Google App Store. And those are the two primary ones out there. Google calls it its Android Play Store. And Apple is kind of an iTunes kind of deal. But you got to watch out. Because back in the day, I remember when apps were the big thing, when everybody had to have an app. And so what a lot of companies did was they basically put just a virtual version of their website and gave it an icon. And they submitted it to Apple and Google for approval. And back in the day, back when these app stores hardly had any apps at all, they approved it. But then they realized, you know what? No, there's not any extra value that this app gives that one couldn't give just by going to their website. So they stopped that. So let me just tell you right now, if your goal is simply to make an icon to go to your website, there's an easy and free way to do that. Each phone, your Apple phone and a Google phone, have the ability to make a shortcut to a website, and you'll have an icon for it on your phone. And if someone hands you their phone, you can do it for them. Or you can send instructions on how to do it. It's not that hard. It's kind of like a shortcut, and it costs you nothing. Now, I'm not here to explain how to do that, but what I am here to explain is, don't think you're just going to get a mobile version of your website and call it an app, okay? Both Google and Apple will reject those right out of the chute. An actual app is a custom program designed to give customers functionality they could not receive from a website. That really is it. I tried to make that definition as simple as possible. It is a program. It is a computer program, but it's designed to allow your customers to do something that they couldn't do on your website, or something they could do so much faster in an app. You see, there has to be a very specific purpose for an app. Like I said, it can't just be a version of your website accessible by an app on your phone. And like I said, Google and Apple, now that they have thousands and thousands and thousands of apps, are getting tighter and tighter and tougher on what they allow and what they reject. Now, Apple is the toughest of all. Let me just tell you that right now. Getting into the Apple store is pretty hard because, to be honest, Apple has more rules. One of the reasons Apple is Apple, and that they're very popular and they don't get as many viruses, to be honest, is because of how tough they are and what apps can and cannot do. Google is a little laid back. They do allow some things, but the problem is some people sneak some garbage in. And so Google is a tiny bit more lax on their Androids, but I'm just here to say both are pretty tough when it comes to deciding the usefulness of your app. Not just the safety, but the usefulness of the app. They also consider what kind of rights you're asking for from the phone. You know, are you asking for access to the user's contacts? Are you asking for access to websites they've been to, you know, to their personal information, their friends list on Facebook? What is your app actually needing in order to function? The more you're going to ask for it, the tougher they're going to be on you, because you're basically asking for private information. Okay. Okay, good. I thought I saw some chats, but so far nothing. Okay. What is a mobile site? Now, you got to realize a mobile website, which is what I'm talking about, is not an app, but they're very important to have. And trust me, once I finish with this slide, some of you are going to go, oh, I don't need an app. I'll just do what he just said. That's all I really need. So it's basically a version of your website that's easy to view and navigate on a mobile device. You know, back in the day, you know, when websites were around, all we had were computers. There were no iPhones around. And so web pages could fit on a screen, a good 12-inch, 13-inch, 15-inch screen, and we could all just sit there and read them. But problem is, smartphones came out, the iPhone came out, and then Androids. And now all of a sudden we wanted to look at web pages on our phones. But the problem is a little harder to do, because why? The screen was so much smaller. So what a mobile site does, and in order to be called a mobile website, it has some very strong requirements. Number one, A true mobile website must have no horizontal scrolling. And what I mean by that is, how many times have y'all ever been on a website on your phone and you had to scroll left and right because it went past your boundaries? You see what I'm saying? That's called horizontal scrolling, left and right scrolling. And it's a big no-no. Now, some of y'all are probably going, Eric, this is no big deal. It is a big deal. And Google sees it as a big deal. And I'll be honest with you, Google is ranking sites that are mobile friendly above sites that are not. That's right. And in fact, they're going to be pushing sites down that are not mobile friendly. So if your website requires horizontal scrolling, you're already breaking one rule. Also, on your phone, do you have to enlarge the text to even read it? You know what I mean, with your fingers kind of going like that on your phone, making it bigger. If you have to do that to look at your website on your phone, it ain't mobile friendly. You see, a mobile friendly website can automatically detect the type of device it is on, and it will adjust itself. You know, back in the day, there were two ways to get a mobile website. One way was to simply create an exact duplicate of your website, but for mobile devices. Problem is, you kind of had to make one for a tablet, one for a phone, and then one for this kind of phone and one for this kind of phone. And it worked, but you ended up having all these different versions of websites that you had to keep updating all the time. So the new way to do it these days is what we call an adaptive approach. Okay. In other words, the website automatically detects what it's going to be viewed on, and it adjusts itself. It adjusts its margins. It adjusts its, font sizes. It adjusts a lot of things, even how big the pictures are before they're downloaded, so it doesn't use up a lot of data. So that is the kind of where you want to go. The final requirement is for us fat-fingered people. And that's if you pull up your website on a mobile phone and it's hard to hit the right button because the buttons are so small, well, that's another problem. You've got to have large buttons for easy navigation. The buttons, someone's finger must be able to hit the right button without hitting 3 or 4 buttons. Those are the 3 requirements, and Google actually makes those 3 requirements. Now, some of y'all might be wondering, Eric, is my website mobile friendly? I wish there was a way to find out. There is. All you need to do is go to Google, and you're going to type Google mobile friendly test. Those exact words. And it will pull right up. Let me show you. When you pull it up, it will look just like this. And this is Google's official site for this. And it is critical that you do this for your website if you have not. So all you do is go in there and put your website in there, and I'm just going to throw in Amazon. And then you click test URL. Now watch what it does. It's actually going to sit there and analyze the first page of the site. It's going to look at the home page of the website, and then it's going to give us a grade, and it's going to tell us if there are any problems. Okay, sometimes it can take just a little bit. This costs you exactly nothing. And it will come up and tell you, boom. So it comes up and says, yes, which I would hope it did. The page is mobile friendly. If it was not, it would start telling you what the problems were. And it would even show you an example of what came up over here. Now, every one of you are probably going to see this page loading issues thing, okay? And that's because Google doesn't give you a lot of time, or doesn't give your server a lot of time to come back with it, because a mobile phone supposedly is going to use a lot of data. So if it's taking too long to download the page, Google's going to gripe at you. And so that's kind of what this is, and it's basically, I wouldn't worry too much about this part, really. because just about everyone's going to get this error. As long as you get a green here, page is mobile friendly. And I know some of you are going there right now, putting in your own website. Pay attention. You're going to get a copy of this presentation, okay? And you can go through this and do it on your own. Some of you are going to do this test. You're going to discover that your page is not mobile friendly. If that happens, then you need to contact your web designer and you need to demand it. Because did you know that way more than half of the people, listen to me, way more than half the people looking at your web page are doing so on a mobile device, not on a computer. So the question is, what kind of experience are they getting on a mobile device? What kind of experience are they getting on their phone? Now you can pretty much figure that out by just pulling up your own website on your phone too. But the Google test will really be the way to know if you're being hurt by that fact. It shouldn't be that hard for most web designers to update your website to do this well. So you shouldn't be charged a lot. In fact, so many times it's just a matter of flipping a switch or installing a plugin and it's done. So don't let a webmaster demand a lot of money from this, okay? So that is the Google mobile friendly test. I highly recommend that every single one of you do it. Okay. Okay, next. How do we justify getting an app? So we know what an app is not. An app is not a mobile version of your website, okay? So from this point forward, you need to realize that's not what we're talking about. It's easy to do that, and you can do it for free. You can put an icon on your phone that will go to your website in whatever, in Safari or Chrome, Firefox, or whatever your browser on your phone is. There is a way to put an icon. Now, many times you can just, I believe, go into the little hamburger button, if it's Chrome, I believe, and it's like add a shortcut to your screen or something like that. And it will just do it for you. So look into that if that's all you're really wanting to do. And you can help someone with that if they want to easily go to your website on their phone. But once again, make sure that your website is mobile friendly before you start sending all these people to it. So how do we justify an actual app? Well, an easy way is, do you already sell products online? And when I say sell online, I mean, can you put your products in a shopping cart and then they enter a credit card and then you ship it? In other words, it's totally done online. If you already have a shopping cart style website, then you might be able to justify an app. Although, if you're using a good shopping cart software, I mean, it's going to be mobile friendly anyway. So a lot of you may be using Shopify, which is the shopping cart software I recommend. Shopify, SHOPIFY.com. It's the best one out there. If y'all do use a site like that, yeah, it's going to look great on a mobile phone. That's just the very nature of that. So you still may not need an app. But if you do sell products online, that is a good definite sign that you can justify having an app and focus just on what you sell. It's kind of how Amazon does it, to be honest. They have an app and makes it easier to shop online. Okay, here's another big one. Do you have frequent return customers? People. Before you let your pride get in the way of all of this, you got to realize, do you really have people coming back and buying from you frequently? Do you have a lot of return customers? Because that's the only way to justify any app. If all you do is one-time purchases, buy once and you'll never see them again, you don't need an app. You see, how many apps do you have on your phone that you don't even use? How many apps do you have on your phone that you're thinking, oh, sometimes I just need to uninstall that. I never use that. Yeah, hundreds. I've seen companies go have an app built to spend a lot of money and then no one used it because what they were purchasing, they didn't purchase often. And it was easier to just go online and do it. So you got to decide if it's something that if they're always needing to contact you, if they're always needing to buy something, if they're always needing to be, connecting with your company in some way, that can justify an app because an app makes it easy, like one click, to connect to you. Also, how is that app going to improve the current website experience? What's better about an app than simply going online and simply going to your website? You've actually got to think hard about this. I tell you, when apps first started coming out, there were companies going to get apps for their company just so they could brag to other companies, hey, we have an app. I'm serious. It became a pride thing. And I'm telling you, it was just wasted money. Wasted money. Okay. So how will the app improve the current website experience? Will it be faster than your website experience? Or will it give them some ability they didn't already have? And then finally, when it comes to justifying an app, you better have the cash. Because trust me, these things ain't cheap. Not custom apps anyway. And we'll talk about what not cheap means in just a minute. And I'll give you some actual numbers. So how do you get an app built? There's basically two choices. You can use a build it yourself solution, which is basically, there's companies out there where you kind of sign in and they give you a bunch of tools and you can drag and drop stuff. And then they'll actually get it approved by the Apple Store, and they'll get it approved by the Google Store, and they'll do all the paperwork and the hard part. And they'll actually give you the tools to create it without you having to understand code and without you having to hire a programmer. They can actually create an app for you, or you can hire programmers. Now, the key is to understand what the difference is between the two. If you do a build it yourself solution, guess what? You're going to be paying a monthly fee for the rest of your life. Because technically, your app will not work without them. Does that make sense? It's kind of like those build it yourself websites. Like Squarespace. Yeah, it makes it easy for you to build a website, but you can never move it somewhere else. In fact, it won't work if you leave Squarespace. So you're always going to be paying Squarespace for the rest of your life. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I love Squarespace. And if you don't mind that monthly fee, go for it. Which I really don't mind. It's a good price. It's like hosting. All I'm saying is realize that's the difference. Also, you won't technically own the app because you didn't develop the app. When you look at who the developer is, it will show those companies. That's not a bad thing because most people don't care who built an app when they decide on it. It is the fastest way to get an app done is to build it yourself. And it is probably the cheapest. Just realize it's going to have an ongoing cost, a monthly cost. Programmers, on the other hand, their costs are all up front. They're just going to charge you by the hour to build this thing. And trust me, those fees can get quite high. And if you do need changes to it, you're going to pay them to do those too. But there's usually no ongoing cost. So let's talk about the build it yourself solutions. Okay. These are the big ones that are out there. And I've kind of ranked them, in fact, based on what my favorite would be. It's kind of like, what is it? Like the top 10 here. That's my top 10 list. Okay. The number one, the one I hear the most success from, the happiest people from, is Epiphany. They always get really good reviews. This is kind of a build it yourself solution. Then there's Shout 'em. Shadow is also very, very good. I like them a lot. And it's kind of a toss-up between Epiphany and Shadow. Now remember, what these places do is you don't have to be a programmer to build an app. You kind of log in, create an account, and yes, you're going to pay them something. Although Epiphany does kind of give you a way to do it for free, but realize their name is going to be all over it. Okay. And so one of the things you're going to pay for is to remove that name. But it is a way to create an app. And with Epiphany, you can create an app for free and see if you even like it and test it. So Shoutem is also very good. I like them a lot. They're a tiny bit more technical. So that's why I kind of pushed Epiphany up there, was because less technical people enjoyed it more. Swiftic and Good Barber are also very good. BuildFire and Moment Cube are also good. And then of course there's App Institute, App Machine, iBuild App, and App Maker. So these are the, now you're saying, well, Eric, why did you give us 10? Why didn't you just say use this? Because I need you to test the waters. I need you to compare. Because just because I say that's my favorite doesn't mean it'll be your favorite. So check out these 10. If you really want to look into this before spending any money, check out these. And I need you to make your own little compare and contrast chart, you know, on how much they cost per month and what do you get, what the experience is like making an app. Have other people done it successfully? If so, go download their app and see what they did and see if you like what they did. You know, does it look professional? You know, also, can you call up somebody and get help? You'd be surprised how difficult that can be once you get further than my top 10. Most of these in the top 10 I've had fairly good contact with. And like I said, I don't like recommending things where you can't get a hold of these people. In fact, let me just show you Epiphany. This is Epiphany. And basically what they brag about is #1 no code development platform. In other words, you don't have to do code. And it says, what would you, look how easy this is. What would you like to create today? A mobile application, a website, task automation, a chatbot, graphics, or live chat. And so, I mean, it's just like get started. And also it's 7 million businesses have used it. You can scroll down and kind of see the people who have used it, awards they've got. There's videos. I really like it when you can get as much information as you can. Okay. Now, let me show you a little something though, when we talk about pricing. Let me see. Let me show you how their pricing works. And pricing plans. Sometimes companies make pricing plans not as obvious as to get to them, but usually at the bottom, you have all the major options. So I'm going to click pricing plans. And basically the way this works is they have a free version, okay? But then they also have a basic version, okay? And so it tells you like, and then theirs starts at $16 a month per app. And it tells you what platforms are supported. Now keep in mind, this is important. With their first 2 plans, only Android. That's what that means, okay? You're going to start paying $60 a month to get that Apple support. If you wanted to run on an iPhone, and I'll be honest, it is harder to get things approved for iPhone. And there's some extra programming that has to go into it. So they're going to charge you $60 a month. It also tells you about where the app can be distributed, and also push notifications. This will be something that's important, because one of the cool things about an app is that it can send out little notifications to people saying, hey, come check me out. I mean, y'all all have apps that do that. They might be news apps that come up and say, hey, there's major news going on. Like, when you get the text, you get a notification. So that's what those little push notifications are. So if your app is like for a massage studio and their appointment's coming up, you can have it automatically send out a little ding, don't miss your appointment. That's what those are. And it tells you how much you can get. So at the $60 a month, you can get up to 75,000 per month. They're also talking about, okay, they won't chat me up. Okay. They're also talking about whether there's ads and how you can look at everything, what kind of emails or what kind of support you're going to get. Now, remember, the $60 a month, that's how you can call them up. You're only getting email and chat with the lower plans. That's what I'm saying. You need to look at this. You need to study this. But I'll be honest, overall, I tend to like Epiphany. And like I said, they put their phone number right up there. And they make it easy. And their apps look really, really, really good. I'm a fan. Okay. And let's see. Okay. So that one option was to build it yourself. Now let's talk about programming teams. This is where you're actually hiring a company to build using code a custom app. They're doing all the work. They're doing all the heavy lifting. You're basically telling them what you want and they're creating the app for you. They might even be designing the graphics for the app. The screen, what the screens look like. They're doing everything. Therefore, this is going to be more expensive. Now, the first one I'm going to recommend, this one is not, it's not necessarily ranked in my favorites. Okay. I kind of ranked it. Well, the first one is there because of cost. I'll just be honest with you. Fiverr has been around for a very long time. If you need a programmer for a quick little something, Fiverr can be a very cost-effective way to do it. The problem is sometimes you don't get the quality you're looking for. And also, there's not as many requirements making sure that what they say they can do for a certain amount of money actually gets done for that exact amount of money. And I've seen situations where someone on Fiverr quotes someone for an app. So yeah, I can build your app for $250. Someone goes, yay. And then it ends up costing way, 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 way more than that. And then what the Fiverr guy will say is, oh, well, you changed the requirements. You added this. Let me just tell you right now, if you're going to be hiring a programming team, listen up. You need to sketch out on a yellow pad what every screen looks like. And I mean every screen. And you need to make a list of what every button on every screen needs to do. And you need to be as comprehensive as possible. If you have not filled up every single page on a new legal pad with information, then chances are you haven't given them enough information. The number one mistake people make when hiring a programming team is underestimating what they want. The programming team is only going to do what you tell them to do. They're not going to read your mind. Good example. Let's say that I was rebuilding Amazon. It never existed. I'm rebuilding it. And someone says, oh, I can build that app for $250. I say, okay, I need the ability to search for books. And they go, oh, okay. Add 150. I say, okay. I also need the ability to buy books. Okay, add 150. Okay, I need the ability to, keep up with purchases I've already made. Okay, add 150. And I think that's all I need. Turns out that's far from what I needed to tell them. First of all, Did I tell them I need to be able to search books by category, search it by author, search it by title, search it by ISBN, search it by... Did I tell them that I need to do a reverse search or search by price? Just in search, there's so much I need to explain to them. Did I need to tell them that I need the ability to remove a book from search? Or even add a book? Did I even ask to, to have a screen where I can add a book? See, you don't think about those things. You assume they know that. They don't. And what about buying a book? Oh, I want them to be able to use a Discover card. Oh, really? Oh, I want them to be able to use PayPal. Really? Oh, I want them to be able to make payments. Oh, I want them to be able to have credits and be able to use those credits. Oh, and did I mention gift cards? It is so easy to so underestimate a project simply because you assumed they would know to do those things. No, programmers are very specific people, and they will only do what you tell them. And so every single function, and I mean every single function, must be laid out. Must be. The big one on the block, the one I keep seeing over and over and over, and it's actually gotten some pretty good reviews, is Hyperlink Info System. Okay. Now they're based in India. Their minimum project, in other words, you're guaranteed to spend at least 10,000. Okay. That's the minimum amount of money you're going to be dropping with these people. But the advantage they have is that their programmers cost less than $25 an hour. Now, before you get all excited about this, let me just tell you, if you're going to be working with a firm based overseas, you've got to realize what that entails. That entails you talking with these people after hours and during their work hours. Even though their salespeople might be very good at English, the programmers aren't. They're not hired for that. And so sometimes when you're trying to get something across, you can't really talk directly to the programmer. You're talking to an interpreter. And you're talking to them at 2 a.m. because that's the only time they're available. And yeah, they're making much less than American programmers. And they're very good. Don't get me wrong. Indian programmers are some of the best in the world. I'm just saying there are some issues. The reason people will do this many times is because they're trying to go low cost. Okay. And if you're okay with some of those barriers you're going to have to get across, for it. The second one I would probably recommend is Mercury Development. They're based in Florida, but their minimum project, you're going to be dropping 25 grand. Okay. 25,000. And guaranteed, that's their minimum. They start at that, just like Hyperlink Info starts at 10,000. But look at the price per hour you're going to be paying their programmers. Upwards of $100 an hour. And let me just tell you right now, it's probably going to be $100 an hour. So, yeah, the programmers are American. And yeah, they work during 8 to 5. But you're going to pay for that privilege. AlgoWorks, they're based in California. Their minimum project is $5,000, and they charge around $25 to $50 an hour. Let me tell you how they work. You are dealing with Americans during 8 to 5 hours, but they have a team overseas. And they're the ones in charge of talking to that team. They're the ones in charge of, and that's how they're getting away with those low hourly rates. Okay. So if you request a change, it may not get done for a good 8 hours because those people are asleep. And also you run the danger, since you're not talking directly to the programmer, of the change not being exactly what you want. But they are cost effective. and you will never be talking to someone that maybe you can't understand. Tech Ahead, also in California, their minimum project size is 25,000, and they're also operating at that same hourly rate. These are the ones I would start with. So let me just tell you, if you're going to do a custom app, you better shop it out. Don't you dare go to one company and say, okay. You need to get proposals from all of them. But here's the deal. Before you can get a proposal, you got to lay out exactly what you need. And when I said a yellow pad full, like you just bought it at Office Depot, brand new yellow pad, every page has writing and pictures on it. That's how you know you're probably getting close to being comprehensive in your proposal. If all you're going to do is send them a paragraph, my app needs to do this. Thanks. Tell me how much that will cost. Trust me, you're going downhill fast. So what are some suitable uses for apps? Now that I've got you completely scared away from having an app built, what are some actual good uses for apps? Well, one of the best ones I've seen is scheduling. You heard me earlier mention like a massage therapist. They want an app where people can schedule appointments themselves and see what's available and just automatically schedule themselves without them having to call for an appointment. It might also have the ability to chat with a therapist or to choose a therapist, or you see what I'm saying? But anything will work with that. Medical scheduling, things for medical or any kind of scheduling might make a good app. Online chatting. If talking to your customers is part of what you do, then giving them a one-click app that lets them talk to you almost immediately, that's what another good reason for an app would be. Like online doctors, or customer care. Online shopping, we've already talked about that. If you're willing to drop some bucks, you can make an app. But remember what I said. Only reason Amazon made an app, and all they are is pretty much online shopping. Only reason they made an app is because people are coming back over and over and over. They have a huge customer return amount. Not that the customers are returning product, but that the customers are coming back. If customers, they got to the point where it was almost like one-click buying. They throw up with their Amazon Prime, you click buy now and boom, you'll have it tomorrow. A lot of people are into that, but that's only available on their app. Okay, so online shopping can be that, but once again, what's going to make it better than shopping on your website? Database searches. If what you do is allow people to search databases, then this can be useful. And in fact, that's going to be the example I talk about here in just a minute. In other words, if there is a huge amount of information that most people don't have access to, then you can make an app for that. Good example would be Wikipedia. If you go and download the Wikipedia app, it makes it very easy to find stuff in Wikipedia. And the reason their app works is because if you just do a search on Google, then you're going to get all sorts of stuff. But Wikipedia wanted it to stay in Wikipedia. Same with IMDb, the Internet Movie Database. Same with them. They make it very easy to sort and search and, find information very quickly. So yeah, they deserve to have an app. And all you're really doing is searching those very large databases. If you want to make some money, I'm telling you, it's the games. It's the games. But games are very expensive, and there's also already a lot of large powerhouses out there. But if you can come up with a game that people love playing, then what you can do is you can throw ads out there and incentivize them to click on those ads. Because if they click on those ads, you make money. I'm serious. Heck, that's how I make money from YouTube. People click on an ad on YouTube when watching one of my videos, I make some money. Easy, free money. Didn't have to work for it at all. It's like gravy. Well, that's how these games work. And if you think about the games you currently like playing on your phone, you'll realize that's true. They're constantly trying to incentivize you to watch an ad. Why? Because they get money from that, especially if you click. In fact, they'll even charge you. They'll say, hey, okay, well, how about for $10 a month or $10 one time, you can play our game without ads. And you'd be surprised how many people do that. So that's another way for them to make money. So how much should it cost? Remember what I said. To build it up, build it yourself is cheaper up front. Remember that Epiphany. It's going to be what, $60 a month. That's their kind of their biggest program. Custom apps have no cap. I'll just say that right now. In fact, you're going to be paying till the end of time because you're going to want to upgrade it. But you're also going to have the most control. So if cash is not an issue, custom app may be the way to go. And now to tell you my app building story. I had a friend of mine come up to me and he had a great idea for an app. He wanted to build an app that basically listed obituaries. It's kind of what the newspapers used to do, right? But no one reads newspapers anymore. So there was no easy way to find obituaries. So he wanted to make an app that would list them and that people could look through them and they would get notified if someone in their contact list, kind of interesting, huh? Suddenly showed up in an obituary. Or if someone on their Facebook list suddenly showed up in an obituary. Brilliant idea, to be honest. And when we started on this, I was kind of the technical person. And we started on this, we quickly realized we were going to have to hire a custom programmer. Well, sadly, I did not get to pick that custom programmer. And he picked someone that he found recommended by someone else. And it was one guy. And we started off. Sadly, that guy was not doing anything. We thought he was, but he wasn't. His investors, my friend's investors, dropped us some nice coin. And really, we got nothing for it. So we ended up having to fire that programmer and hire a programming team. And this team was overseas. And so that team kind of took what this guy had barely started on and kind of went from there. We went from there, but we just weren't getting anywhere. So we had to fire them. And we ended up hiring another team based in Dallas. And they're actually getting it done. It's tough. It's tough, but let me just tell you, his investors, hold on to your seats. His investors have already dropped $250,000 on this app. And it's not done. When I say be careful, I mean be careful. Okay? Any questions on any of this?
You caught me because every time you have a webinar, I find myself wanting to open a browser and get online and immediately start looking up what you're telling us. So, and then I hear you say, listen up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we do
I
send
know.
these and we send it out. So you're going to get the follow up and how we also put it on demand pre-recorded for a week after, and then we put it on YouTube. So if you miss something or you're like me and Eric, corrals you back into to not miss anything, don't worry, it's going to be sent to you. And I know what you're talking about, mobile versus phone app, because I had a colleague that wanted a mobile app, and it was expensive. And it is an app. You have to go to the App Store and download it. And then what ended up with the company is that they just linked it. It was so difficult to update and do things with it that they just linked it back to the website. So the app basically just was, if you had the app and you click on it, it just takes you to the website.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I've heard that story so many times. It's crazy. It's sad. It's sad because people don't think before they do this. And like I said, if you're going to hire a programmer, I can't say this enough. You need to detail out everything, every button, everything you would ever need done. You know,
Let me ask you one question, because we have a technology accelerator in with NMSBDC, and they talk about trademarks and stuff like that. If you feel like you want to develop an app, would you go through something like that? And
yeah,
okay.
mainly to help you get ready, to help you with your proposal or
Okay.
your request for a proposal. That's what it is, an RFP. So yeah, I mean, if you don't get that RFP right, you're going to be in a world of hurt, and you're going to spend a lot more money than you think, because they're only going to propose what you suggest. They're only going to propose based on what you listed out. And you're going to assume, well, everyone knows you need the ability to delete this. You didn't say that, you know? So it's, or I need the ability to zoom in on this product. You didn't say
Gotcha.
that.
Yeah.
It's the little stuff that's going to gig you.
Yeah, I agree. Teddy says great info, so thankful, which Eric, I hear that often every time you're on a webinar. So last call for questions. If no one has any questions, I want to remind you to go to nmsvdc.org for future trainings. Just wanted to let you know that we're here every step of your business. It's not just the one time, it's anytime you need us to help you. So you want to wrap it up, Eric, before I release everyone for today?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
If you just want to play around and think about what could I do with an app, like I said, just go try Epiphany. They actually have a free version where you can kind of play with it and get it built, and you don't even have to launch it, but just see what it's like is all I'm saying. Don't just get dollar signs in your eyeballs and then call someone up and say, let's do it. Don't do that.
Awesome. Great words of wisdom. All right, guys. Thank you so much. You guys have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next time. Bye.